but I do lots of, so I mean, in this topic, I do lots of consultancy for companies, especially for companies in Germany, because they don't know the Muslim consumer or the Islamic consumer. I also do research on this topic, so I'll tell you a bit about the research also later. So I work on how religion shapes companies, right? And this is the outside side. How does religion shape the consumer, right? Great. So let's see if this works well. Yeah, good. So let's start with this. There was a bus campaign in London a couple of years ago. And actually Richard Dawkins, he's an atheist, he's a professor at Oxford, he supported this bus campaign. And the bus campaign says, there is probably no God, stop worrying, enjoy your life. Right? And actually in academia and many, many business schools, that's what people think and teach. Now the problem with this is, if people believe in religion, religion is a social fact. So whether you believe or whether I believe in religion doesn't matter. If the consumer believes in religion, it matters to you as a business person, right? So we're not talking about whether God exists or not. I mean, that's theology, right? That's someone else. But people believe in it. And because they believe in it, it shapes the way we should do business, right? And that's the bottom line. That's really important, because maybe you're like, but I'm not religious. You don't have to be. But if people around you are, you have to understand how do you approach them. So religion shapes consumption, right? And it's somewhat. And we'll talk about how it shapes consumption and what it does not do. So let's talk about Islam. And I'll give you insights of Islam and then what that means for marketing and for business, right? And I think to have this kind of basic knowledge about the religion helps you approaching the Islam from the right way. I'll give you one example. There's a basic ruling in Islam that men are not allowed to wear gold. Men are not allowed to wear gold. Gold chains.
We're not allowed
men,
to wear
yeah, men are not. Women are allowed, men are not. I did, for example, consultancy for a bank. And gold is something in the Middle East, for example. It's quite prominent. I mean, gold. Like you want to, and for a bank, what they want to do is they want to do a campaign and say your gold is safe and invest your gold in this and that. And their campaign, they wanted to take a picture with men and women wearing gold. Now, gold for men to wear is forbidden in Islam. If they had done this campaign, they would have shown a picture of a man and a woman and so on. Like really negative for them as a campaign. Right? So knowing that gold is forbidden for men to wear is a religious ruling that's very important from a marketing perspective. Imagine your campaign, you want to sell something and you make it like a man with gold, and immediately you're like, this is gold. Marketing or doing business, right? Or even if you want to give a gift, like, I mean, if, I don't know, if you give gold rings as a gift, you wouldn't give it to a man. I mean, you might also give it to a woman, but these are different, like difficult or dangerous nuances. If perceived wrongly, you might actually be harmful for your marketing. So a bit about Islam. Okay, this meme is actually, I think, on the top. Is it in your slides? Is it? Let's just have a look. Yeah, no, he's also incorrect. Okay. So actually, this is supposed to be here. Islam, and that's important. Again, from obviously comes the word comes from the Arabic root SLM. So these are three letters. Sin, Lam, Mim. These are the three letters Islam is derived from. Why am I saying this to you? Because again, if you want to think about a campaign later on, you might want to use the language in your campaign. Right? If you think about, okay, if you know that that's the root, any word, any concept you have, many companies, for example, use Arabic words for their campaign. And you need to know then the root and what it relates to. And therefore, I mean, if later on you want to pursue something, think about, I mean, either employing an expert or think about how you can use the language to use for your brand or your campaign and so on. So salam, and that's the root word for Islam, which means peace, but also means submission. And Muslim, so you said, is Muslim the same or not? Muslim, if you think about the letters, Muslim has the same letters in it. Right? It's Salamim. So actually the root is the same of that word. And Muslim just means, it's a grammatic way, it means the person who is submitting to Islam. That's then the meaning to it. So in terms of actually the etymology, it comes from the same root. Okay? So what are Islam? What do you think, how many pillars does Islam have? You know how many pillars Islam has? Don't Google it. I mean, I can Google it myself. It's okay if you don't know it. I just need to know how much you know about Islam. Islam has certain pillars which are quite famous. Which, if you don't know, I'll tell you a bit. So now, okay. So Islam has 5 pillars. And we'll go through these pillars. And they are the key. I mean, many Muslims adhere to these 5 pillars. And knowing these 5 pillars helps you again thinking about campaigns, right? I mean, I don't know the products you want to focus on later on in your life, but you will have to apply the things I say to the certain businesses you are in and the products you have and so on, right? But that's okay. So 5 pillars. Does Islam have one scripture or many scriptures? One scripture. What's it called? You want to help? You know the name of the scripture?
Scripture is
Oh,
Bible.
The book.
Is the old Bible.
What is it?
Mama.
Maybe it's the right one. It's called the Quran. Quran, yes. But actually, Islam is based on 2 kinds of scriptures. So that's the one you know. I mean, it's like the Bible people know, the Torah people know, the Quran people know. But actually, Islam has on the one hand the book, the Quran, and on the other hand the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. So Muhammad was for Muslims the last prophet, and what he said is for many Muslims very, very important. And it's so important that it actually helps in campaigns. So just recently I was advising an Islamic bank in Germany, and they use a saying of the Prophet in part of their marketing. Yeah. So they have, for example, a gala dinner, and we'll come on. And what they do is they use the date tree as a logo for the company. If you think about a date, date tree, and people are like, oh, okay, a date tree, right? I mean, you might say, oh, interesting logo. But for Muslims, a date tree is a very religious symbol. So by knowing this, they chose this symbol, they chose the saying of a prophet on the date tree, and used this as a branding tool. Right? So knowing what the scriptures are, what's in the scripture, will help you. And we'll talk a bit about what is in the scripture later on, and how this helps you to understand the Muslim or Islamic consumer. And then last thing is, do you know this concept of Sharia compliance? So many banks, again, want to be Sharia compliant. Sharia is the kind of the ethical, legal ruling for Muslim. So the Quran, like the Bible, has rules on how to behave, right? It says, do this, don't do this, and so on. And the derived rulings is then called Sharia. And Muslim organizations often want to be Sharia compliant. And we'll talk a bit about what that means as well as we go on. Let's start with, so I said 5 pillars, right? The first pillar is the kind of belief in God and the Prophet. And you might have seen this before. So it's, I mean, this is the same. It says, Ashhadu, so right to left, right? I mean, Arabic right to left. A small nuance, if you do marketing in the Middle East, I mean, the way the eye reads is obviously the other way around, right? So if you create a marketing campaign for a country where writing is the other side, you actually want to start in different ways, because the eye reads the newspaper differently, right? That's a small thing. What's interesting here actually is, so this is pillar number 1, and it's used often. So this, for example, is a tattoo put on a wall, right? And there are many other, for example, rings where you can see it. So there are many products where this is written on. Right? Interesting that you can use this kind of first pillar, for example, in these products. Now, what's important though, it says, so that what it says is, I believe that there's no God but God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. And that's what it says. Because it says so, people, let's say you create a ring or something with this on it. You think, well, that's good, right? I mean, I'll sell it. Many Muslims would not use it in the bathroom. So they would take it off in the bathroom. Why? Because they believe this is important, and the toilet is not clean, so they wouldn't do it. And again, this is important because you might have a product idea where you want to sell something, but you might have to be careful that things like that might not be taken to the bathroom. So for example, if you have like a chain or something with the saying, you might want to make it easy to open and close so that you can leave it open away. Or for example, what some people do is they have it written and then it's closed into something else so they can join and go to the bathroom. Right? So again, nuances which once you know them, it helps you to sell the product better. This is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is the prayer. So the second pillar in Islam is to pray. Do you know how often Muslims pray a day? If they pray, 5 times. Yes, 5 times. So this is my friend actually. He has a company called Style Islam. He produces products particularly for Muslims. And he designed this bag. So this is a bag. And what he did is very smart. Now Muslims pray 5 times a day. They need to pray. It has to be clean. So he developed a bag like this. But this part of the bag is a prayer mat. So you can open this on both sides and use it to pray.
Oh.
Right? Very, very smart. So as you can see here, this is really a prayer mat on top of a bag. Right? So knowing that Muslims often want to pray 5 times a day, and not all do, some do, he thought about how can I do something with a product to make them, make it easier for them to pray. Again, something I think, if you know that they pray 5 times a day, what does it do for your product? Right? The third pillar is zakah. Zakah is, effectively, you have to pay as a Muslim 2.5% of your income every year. It's kind of like a tax, which Muslims are supposed to pay. Now this is important too, and this is just a video. So, okay, you could say, well, I know this, let me create a video and sell this video. But for Islamic banks, this is actually very, very powerful. And I tell you why this is powerful. Muslims are supposed to pay 2.5% on the money they own, which is not active. Which means, if I put money, for example, in a bank account, it's not active, right? It lies at the bank account, I get interest there and so on. By the way, interest is also forbidden in Islam. So that's why they don't put money normally on, like in normal banks, Muslims are not allowed to have interest. So many banks in England actually created Islamic bank accounts without interest. Now though, if you put money on a bank account, it lies there, right? It just increases maybe in value. Let's say I have 20,000 euros in a bank account. I now have to pay 2.5% interest. I lose money, right? Let's say I want to make money. If I know the Islamic rule says money which is not active and which I own, I have to pay interest. Now I own it, I don't want to give it away, but I can make it active. So what Islamic banks do is they say, you know what, give the money to us, we invest the money in companies, and we diversify, and the return you get a share of. Now this is powerful for 2 ways. One is, now interest, I have to pay and I have to give away, because I'm not allowed to get interest. I lose money. Money on a deficit account, I lose 2.5% because I have to give it away. If the Islamic bank invests the money, I get a return, I can own and keep the return, and because the money was active, I don't have to pay zakah. I don't have to pay 2.5%. Example, I put 20,000 euros in a bank account, normal account. I get 2% interest. After a year, I have 200 euros, right? I have to give away the 200 euros because of interest. And I have to pay 2.5%, so I have to give away another 250 euros. So after 1 year, I only have 9,750 euros left. Let's say I give the money to the Islamic bank. Different rules, practice, and so on. I don't have to pay, I don't get interest, but let's say I get 200 euros return. I can keep the return, and I don't have to pay the zakah. So I have 10,200 euros after a year. Which means I have 450 more euros because I put it on the Islamic bank. Again, if you know the rules of the Islam, it helps you to create a product which makes Muslims want that product. Right? Because Muslims think interest is forbidden, they cannot use the normal bank account. Which actually means that it's not the same consumer, right? It's just by the rulings there is, I have a financial incentive to have a different product. And that's what Islamic banks generally do. And if you're interested in Islamic finance, we can also talk about Islamic finance more. Because I also work on Islamic finance. But I'll talk generally about Islam and marketing. And obviously, if you're interested in it, we can talk about Islamic finance too. So the fourth pillar is fasting. So Muslims fast once a year. For how many days? What do you think? How many days they fast?
1 week.
How many? 1%? More? More than that. And fasting, by the way, fasting is like this. Sunrise till sunset, no food, no drinks, and no consumption. from morning, like sunrise and sundown, till dawn. What do you think, how many days? Anyone? What do you think, how many days? 12, you say? More? A month, exactly. 30 days. So it's 30 days. Again, you might say, so why does it matter? It matters because actually in the Middle East, for example, in many Muslim majority countries, productivity goes down. So if you have companies in these countries, productivity goes down. Why? Because they fast, right? At the same time, consumption actually goes up. And you know why? Like, for example, food consumption goes up. Why is that? Because they eat a lot in the evening. Right? They have feasts, lots of big feasts. So you fast all day, and in the evening you have lots of food. So if you think about selling a product, food products, for example, you might actually start in Ramadan, right? Because people they're very hungry. So you introduce a product. If you're hungry, everything tastes good, right? I mean, bread and water tastes good if you're hungry. So that might be an interesting way of introducing a product in Ramadan. So 30 days they are fasting. Do you know, is it every year the same days or is it different each year? So it's actually different days. And the reason being that Muslims actually follow the moon calendar. And I mean, China, you also have a different calendar, right? What's it called, the calendar in China? You have a different China. And I mean, you have the year of the rat. Yeah, exactly. So Muslims have this moon calendar, the calendar for the moon, and that calendar year is 10 days shorter than our year. And because of that, each month, I mean, so they have 12 months, but 10 days less. So actually, Ramadan, every other month, changes every year for 10 days. Again, something which is important because by changing these things, I mean, let's say you want to know Ramadan, I introduce a product. What day is it this year? 1st of August. Well, next year it's 20th of July. Right? It changes by 10 days each year. And here you see the dates. So, as I said, the dates, are mentioned in the Quran. They are mentioned in many sayings. Again, something which is very important. So, many Muslims begin in the evening when they eat the date. So, if you want to start a video campaign, again, you might think about using the date, for example. And the fifth pillar is this. Do you know where this is? You probably know where this is, right?
No.
Exactly. So this is Mecca. It's called the pilgrimage, the Hajj. Each year about 4 million go for the pilgrimage. And they go there again, depends between 30 and 30 days each year. So they fly to Mecca and perform certain things. Again, important, if you think about travel and tourism and so on, there's a whole business just to do traveling, right? Travel agency. And for example, if we talk about tourism for a moment, there actually are many hotels who try to kind of tap into the Muslim market. And Muslims, for example, they are not allowed to drink alcohol. Many hotels sell alcohol. So you might create a hotel, and there are hotels without alcohol. And some Muslims want to go there. And another thing, for example, you know that there are clothing rules for men and women? Do you know the rule for women, what they're supposed to wear? You see the headscarf, for example, right? So women are supposed to cover certain things, but also men. So men, for example, are supposed to cover from here to here. So I just saw, for example, a swimsuit for men. Many swimsuits for men are this, right? Like short. Now, a Muslim man might not buy this. And what the guy created, he created a short like this with an additional short under here. And now he sells it, and he sells it, it sells very well. And same for Muslim women. And the hotels, what they do, for example, is they separate men and women in swimming pools. There's 2 pools for men and for women. Fitness centers, there are some fitness centers where now like an area only for women. Also others have this. But Muslim women, for example, as a market, you might actually get this market because you create a different kind of fitness center structure. Right? Okay, let's now talk about the Muslims and then making get to marketing. So 1.6 billion, maybe even more Muslims in the world. For you from China, that's like nothing, but it's still 1.6 billion, right? It's 23% of the world population. 85% are Sunni, 50% are Shia. So obviously, one thing which is important, I'll tell you what this means, is if you want to do marketing for the Muslim consumer, there is no one Muslim consumer, right? There's no one Christian. There are Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox, and so on. so there are many different, obviously, beliefs in Islam. And that's important to know. And one big difference, for example, is Sunni and Shia. And that's basically, a difference in belief on who was the successor of Muhammad. And that shaped also the way things are understood. Most Shia live in Iran. And Iran has most Shia Muslims, for example. So entering a market with a different religious belief, for example, within Islam, you might also think about it differently. For example, let's say you create a company, you want to go into the Islamic market. Maybe having a Shia Muslim or Sunni Muslim might be difficult in other areas because people might not accept it. Right? Now, let's talk about the Muslim consumer. As I said, Muslims are different, right? With different religious beliefs, different this, different that. How would you map the Muslim consumer? Let's say you want to create a product, but you want to understand the Muslim consumer. And also to understand the Muslim consumer, you have to understand that there are many types. So let's map it now. How would you call it? Let's say it's different categories for mapping the Muslim consumer. What are different categories you think of? And if you have to put in a category for this axis and a category for this axis. Any thoughts? So you know there are 1.6 billion Muslims, but they're not all the same, right? So let's distinguish them. How would you distinguish them? I'll give you one example. One second example for you. One example would be, let's say I'll take this one here, and I'll say religious. Right? Some people are less religious, others are more religious. And that's important because in the hotel, for example, I mentioned, less religious people might be like, I don't need a separate hotel. Right? More religious people might be, I only go to a hotel when men and women are separate. One. So religiousness might be one. What is another one? Another category. Anyone? What time is it in China now? What time is it in China?
Is
6 p.m.
So you're not asleep, okay. So you're awake, 6, 7 p.m. It's dinner time, okay. So any other category you have? So I said religiousness might be one. What other categories are there to help us structure the Muslim consumer?
Is still related to consumption.
Sorry?
Is still related to consumption.
What I mean is really that you want to structure your product towards Muslim consumers, but they are not the same, right?
Yes.
So, for example, this room, I can structure you in woman and men. I can structure you in this side and that side. I can structure you in age, right? Old, young.
Yeah, I would think about the purchasing power.
Purchasing power, that's very good. So richness, purchasing power. The Muslim market, very, very good. The Muslim market actually is often divided in quite very rich and very poor. Because there are many, many very rich Muslims. Like the luxury market in the Muslim world is quite big. I mean, think about sheikhs, like who are super rich. You talk about Ferraris, having 10 Ferraris, right? But those are very, very poor people. And maybe actually the middle class is less prominent than, for example, Europe. Europe has a big middle class. Actually, the Middle East, for example, has a strong rich class and also lots of poor people. Okay, so yeah, wealth is another category. What other categories are there? So we have age, we have gender, we have geography, right? Again, that's another category you could say. Middle East, Asia, it's not the same. Again, you want to sell differently.
Purchasing behavior.
Purchasing behavior. So the behavior, how is that? Okay, so what would you put it if you say it differently? Well, because that's actually the outcome, right? I mean, we're mapping it, so it's not a category, it's the outcome. Because what we're saying is the purchasing behavior is different because of. And we're trying to find the because of. So what else is there? I'll give you one other, which is kind of the modernism. So you might have very conservative people who are quite modern. You might also have very liberal people who are quite modern. And also non-modern. And with modern, I mean, for example, open to technology and this and that. So you might have very tech-savvy Muslims. let's say you're very conservative, but very religious conservative, but very modern. Well, there are apps, for example, to find where the prayer is. It's like the prayer direction. Because actually Muslims pray towards this. So Muslims, when they pray, so they pray 5 times a day, they need to know the direction for this. So people created an app where you find this. Now, let's say a non-conservative might be, I don't pray, I don't care. A very conservative but not modern might not have a phone. But the modern conservative person, he or she would need this app. But understanding this helps you to design the app. So the app is for people who are religious, because they have to pray 5 times a day, and who are technology savvy, right? They will buy the app. Let's say non-technology but religious, no app. Because you know the old campus, so use the old campus. Don't pray, no technology, don't need it. They pray, if they don't pray, but they're technology savvy, but they don't pray, they don't need it. Right? So only the Muslims who are technology savvy and who pray need the app. So understanding this helps you to see who to target. There are also an app, for example, for prayer, for Quran. So there's the Quran as an app. Again, something for certain types of people. Right? On the right hand side, so 23% of the world population now, but it's actually the fastest growing religion in the world. It might have up to 30% in 30 years of the world population. So it's a growing market. People are getting richer, so the Muslims are getting richer, so they can buy more. And quite a lot of Muslims become more religious. So you have more Muslims, richer Muslims, and they care more about Islam. Which means this is a huge market. Right? What do you think are the 4 countries? What do you think are the countries with the highest Muslim population? Egypt, you say? Egypt is not even in the top 4. Not the top 4. India? India is number 3.
China.
China is also not top 4. I mean, China has like 30 million Muslims. Around 30 million.
30 million.
30 million, yes. I think they're 30 million. So India is number 3. What do you think is number 1 or 2?
Somewhere in Africa?
No.
No.
Saudi Arabia.
No. It's interesting, right? I mean, because, so when you see Islam, many people see this as Islam. But actually it's not in the Middle East.
Pakistan.
Pakistan is number 2. Yeah, so Pakistan number 2, India number 3. Number 1 is Indonesia.
Oh.
Which is quite close to China, right? I mean, that's close. I mean, actually all of them, India, Pakistan, it's quite close. And the interesting thing is, I mean, if you think about India and Indonesia, the majority of the population is not Muslim. I mean, in Indonesia, the majority is not Muslim. In India, the majority is not Muslim. Which means, if you want to target these Muslims, you target to a market where the majority is not Muslim. Which is different, right? If you have a product in let's say, Saudi Arabia, they're all Muslim. You can sell it like this. But in India, you might have to sell differently, because the majority is not Muslim. Right? And that's very different. If you think, I mean, if you sell it to a market where the majority is not actually believing in it, it's hard to sell. Let's say this water. You want to sell this water to Muslims in England. If you sell it only to Muslims, non-Muslims will not buy it. So you want to sell this water to everyone, but also Muslims. So you need to create a campaign which targets everyone, but also Muslims. And for example, one example I will give you is here, this. So the Islamic Bank, for example, which I advised, they are in Germany. Now Germany has 4 million Muslims, 76 million non-Muslims. If they go in and be like, we are the Islamic Bank, Islam, 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 well, only Muslims will go there. No one else will go there, right? Like, why would I want to go? Plus, Muslims might be like, yes, I'm Muslim, but I don't want to run around and say I'm Muslim to everyone. So even the Muslims will not go there because they are a minority. Maybe in Saudi Arabia, everyone is Muslim, like, yes, I'm Muslim. But in Germany, it's more like, I'm Muslim, but let me be quiet about this. So what they do is, and I think that's important, it's subtle marketing, very subtle. So the date, for example, if you think about the dates, you can say, well, we have a date tree logo and this and that, and the non-Muslims are like, oh, that's nice, it's good. And the Muslims are like, yes, dates, very good. So they create messages which have a subtle, a hidden meaning. And I think if you want to sell something to a minority Muslim market, you actually want to create marketing messages with two meanings. So I have the meaning for the Muslim, dates, and for the non-Muslim, no, it's okay, right? And that's very, very important because actually the biggest markets, I mean India and Indonesia, number 1 and number 3 are minority Muslim markets. Right? So Pakistan number 4 is, by the way, is Bangladesh, which is also close to you. So actually the majority of the Muslims in the world live in Asia, which means for you, you're often China, right? I mean, that's very close. The market is right in front of you. It's not the Middle East as many people might think. Okay, before we go on then, one thing which is also important. I always say religion shapes consumption, but there are many things which shape religion and many things which shape consumption. What is shaping religion and consumption too? Can you give me some things which also shape religion or consumption?
Like food, some food are prohibited, forbidden to eat. So, infants,
Sorry?
like Muslim, they are not allowed to eat pork.
Okay.
Yeah, that's affected because of that.
But that's religion, right? I mean, we'll talk about this as well, but that's religion. So what I wonder is, can you give me anything which shapes religion or shaped consumption apart from religion? Anything?
A book cover.
The book cover. In what way?
Bibles. People read Bible and need to keep Bible clean and not break. So the book cover.
Okay. So let me give you some examples and then maybe you can give me some more. Examples shaping religion and consumption would be, for example, culture.
Culture. Oh, yes.
I mean, think about the Chinese Muslim. The Chinese Muslim is different from the Saudi Arabian Muslim.
No.
Right? The Chinese Christian is different from the Italian Christian. Right?
Different, yes.
But that, you need to know this, right? You need to know this because if you sell something to the Arab Muslim, it's different from the Chinese Muslim. So culture might be different. Geography might be different.
Geography.
I mean, again, if it's a country where it's hot, you might want to sell differently than when it's cold. So for example, right, we talk about clothing, right? So Muslim women are supposed to cover, let's say, the hair and the skin, right? I mean, again, whether that's true or not is a different question, but let's say Muslims, some women believe this. Now, if you're in a hot country, you might want to design clothes which are very thin, but still cover it. So I've seen, for example, many companies producing products which are thin, but you can see through it. Now, for a Muslim woman, she doesn't want to buy that. So again, if you understand that in a hot area, so you want something which is thin, but you can't see through it. I often see women, for example, you have like shirts like this one, and you can see through it a bit. Which is fine for us maybe, it's fine for you maybe, but the Muslim woman will be like, I don't want this. So knowing this, hot country, you want to sell something thin, but not see through. In a cold country, it doesn't have to be thin, right? So again, that region, geography is important, shaping culture and shaping religion and consumption. Other things? What else do you think shapes religion? So politics, for example. Politics is another one. I mean, countries have rules, and these rules shape the way. For example, again, in Saudi Arabia, it's forbidden to sell alcohol. It's forbidden.
Oh, yeah.
So that means it shapes the way religion is enacted. Right? It shapes the way consumption is done. So a huge market, for example. So many Muslims, they look for alternative products to alcohol. Again, something interesting. For example, there are these champagne bottles which have orange juice in it, or something else. So imagine you're super rich. Like the most expensive drinks are generally alcohol, right? They cost a lot. You can buy wine bottles for thousands of pounds or euros, right? But orange juice, the most expensive orange juice is like 5 euros, 6, 7 euros, 8 euros. You're super rich. You want the best in the world. So what people do is they create these beautiful bottles and they try to create an atmosphere like a champagne bottle, right? Let's say you have a feast. You want a really expensive, a minister, this, that. You want a nice food. You don't want to put this bottle. If I put this bottle in, they're like, this is just a plastic bottle of water, right? I want something nice. But this is already nicer. Right? I can put this in, okay, good. This one, Oxford here, this looks nice. But I might have something even more nicer. Again, this is a huge market. If people don't drink alcohol, but they want the beauty of a wine bottle, you might want to think about how you sell, not wine, but an alternative wine. And it's not the wine alternative, it's the experience which I want to sell. Right? And then you might actually think about the redesigning the bottle in different ways. Especially, as I said, it's already forbidden. So politics shaping, and again, how things are consumed. Anything else? What do you think else is shaping religion and consumption? Any suggestion from you? No idea. Okay. Here? What do you think shapes you and your consumption? Sorry? Price? Okay. Yeah. So again, that's right. So how much money you have, right? So wealth shapes consumption and religion too. Because the clothing you want to buy for praying, for example, whether you go to pilgrimage in a 5-star hotel or a 1-star hotel, right? If you said to Mecca, the Muslims are supposed to go to Mecca once in a lifetime. 5-star, 1-star hotel, no hotel. Okay, price. What else shapes you? Your consumption.
Colorful goods.
Okay. So colorful, that's a product. But what shapes you, who you are? Like you are someone, and the person who you are shapes the way you consume things, right? So what makes you you? What is unique about yourself or different?
Education.
Education, very good. So education is very important. That's a very good point. So education actually, so some people, are obviously better educated than others, and the way they approach religion and consumption is different. To give you one example, there's a strong movement for fair trade and locally produced and green and some biology products, right? To get eggs from locally produced peasants and so on. Now, generally educated Muslims care about this. Less educated care less about this, right? So knowing the consumer, how educated he or she is, helps you again addressing this Muslim consumer. So education is very important. Another one is age. Right? Many Muslim markets are quite young. Others are a bit older. Again, that means the way you approach the consumer is different from each other, right? Older Muslims, you might think about different things. Younger Muslims might care about other things. Right? Anything else? You have something in mind?
Lifestyle.
Lifestyle, okay. Yeah. So, can you tell us a bit how lifestyle could shape religion and consumption?
I think Muslim treat family very important, and normally people move the whole family, and so that to go out and stay inside should be have their own special goods, different like Europeans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. So family, I mean, again, it's not only Muslims, right, who care about family, others care about family too. But yeah, family is a value which is very important for many Muslims. So, and what that means, imagine you're an architect, you want to sell a house. So actually, many Muslims want to have houses, not only for their family, but actually their relative families too, but still have kind of a place where they come together. But that's a completely different design from the house we know here. So here's like, I live here, my mother is far away. But if they come together, you design the house differently. Also, by the way, the advertising, right, for food. So, I mean, normal European family is mother, father, maybe one child. So on TV, you make like an advertisement, father, mother, one child, kind of. But if you make it in a Muslim country, if you make this, you're like, this is very sad. Imagine, you have 20 kids or 10 kids, and you see an advertisement with one kid. You would be like, this is very sad, I don't want to buy this food. This is a very sad picture, right? I mean, it's sad. And it makes you cry. One child, the food must be awful. Whereas for Europe, this might be all okay. I mean, China, I mean, I guess it means one child, right, generally. So that means, if let's say I make an advertisement in China with 10 kids, people will be like, they must have done something illegal. You're not allowed to have more than one kid or 2 kids, right? So the advertisement is very different in China than, let's say, in Saudi Arabia, where you will have more kids. So yeah, lifestyle, family, all these things matter. So anytime you want to start a campaign, you want to start a product, you need to know this context to sell it directly to the consumer and his or her wants. Right, so this, what do you see here?
Young lady?
Young lady, you see a young lady. Who else sees a young lady? Do you see a young lady?
Yes.
Do you see a young lady?
Yes, I think.
And an old one. You all see an old lady? You see the old lady?
This is my design.
Can you in Chinese tell them where the old lady is?
佢條頸嗰條頸鏈係嗰個女人個口，個婆婆個口，咁嗰個女仔個下巴，成塊面個下巴就係嗰個婆婆個鼻，個女仔個耳仔就係個婆婆隻眼。
Do you understand?
Yep.
I don't know. Do you understand?
So many, I mean, imagination, so many. Sorry, I can't see.
You see the
I
old lady?
can't see.
Okay, I'll do.
Oh.
So this is the nose of the young lady,
Yeah.
and this is the nose of the old lady.
個婆婆成個鼻。
This is the eye of the young lady.
Oh, I see.
This is the eye of the old lady.
個婆婆隻眼，
Oh.
即係個婆婆嘅側面咯。條頸鏈
Do you see
就
the
係個
ladies?
口。
Do you see both?
Yeah, I suppose.
You see both.
I suppose, yeah.
Sorry, you can see both.
You see both. Do you see both?
I saw only young lady, but now I can saw too.
This side is that so. But they have up there.
Behind you,
Yeah, he had to see a young lady.
Yeah.
He wanted to see
He agrees. But he agrees. And
only see the old lady hair after you point out. Okay.
now what I want to say with this actually is that if you only see one market, you miss out the whole rest of the market, right? The other market. I mean, if you only see a certain type of market, you don't see the other market. And the Muslim consumer, the Islamic consumer, often is not seen, and because he or she is not seen, they're not targeted. So for example, Muslims don't eat, they only eat halal food. Halal food means it's meat which is slaughtered in a certain way. Do you know about this, halal? So the cow, for example, the meat here in the college, for example, Muslims don't eat this meat unless it's slaughtered in a certain way. So there's a procedure because the blood has to go out of the animal first. Okay? That's what Muslims believe. Now, the college or other places might not know this. Right? They only see the young lady, they don't see the old lady. What do Muslims do? Let's say they eat here. What do you think they do? They cannot eat the chicken. They cannot eat the cow. What do they do when they eat here?
only eat the vegetables.
Exactly, they eat the vegetables, right? That's what they eat. Now let's say you're a restaurant. You don't have halal meat. What do Muslims do? They eat the vegetables. Now the problem is, you don't see the young lady. You only see, oh, that's good, right? I sell vegetables. You don't see, because the Muslim, you don't see that they don't want the chicken you have, because they eat something else. But actually, what they really want is not the vegetables, they want the other meat, right? So by not understanding that there's a young lady, you might reject this. Now that means that if you start selling first this other type of meat, most Muslims who just eat the vegetables here will not come to this restaurant. They will get this other meat, right? So now you don't see the Muslim consumer, because no Muslim, I don't eat, because they eat something, they have to eat something. But what they eat, the vegetables, they don't really want to eat. They want to eat the meat with the vegetables, right? So if you open a restaurant, let's say in China, with halal meat, you might get all these Muslims who currently eat everywhere else to you. But you don't see it, because currently they eat everywhere, but maybe just vegetables. Yeah? So seeing this other woman is very important. And actually, so this is a similar story on this side. What many companies do is, they only talk to the customers they have now. So let's say you sell pork, or you sell non-halal meat, right? You sell chicken, and you talk to the customer and say, do you like the meat? You say, yes, I like it, right? You talk to them, yeah, I like it. Why? All your customers like it, because the Muslims are not your customers, right? So you think like, yes, I have a good business, right? Every customer likes my product. But who do you miss? You miss the Muslim customers, because they are not your customers, they don't eat your chicken. So actually, everyone who asks your customer says, this is great food, and you get the best, you get 10 stars, everything great. You're actually missing out maybe a lot of Muslims who are potential customers, right? Does this make sense? Okay. Let's have 2-3 minutes. Are there any questions at this point before we go on? Any questions, thoughts? No? Do you have a question? So this picture, what it shows is, you kind of create products you think are good. You then talk to your customers and say, are they good? And when they say yes, you keep on doing it. When they say no, you stop doing it. The problem is, you don't talk to everyone else who's not your customer. You don't talk to them. But there's a huge market here and here. So a company, any company actually, what they have to do is, you have to talk to the whole market. Also for innovation, for example, if you create a new product, don't talk to your customers only. Talk to everyone else outside as well. Yeah? So, talking a bit about Islamic products and practices, and a couple of terms. So food, as I mentioned before, Muslims generally want halal food. And halal means the way the meat is slaughtered. It means no alcohol. It means no pork, for example. So, give you an example. If you fly in Europe, certain airlines, they sell gummy beers. Do you know gummy beers? Haribo gummy beers. Let's see. I don't have them here. But okay, another example. I mean, Mars is fine, but some chocolate has alcohol in it, right? So a Muslim will not buy this. If you don't offer a variety, you might actually not get this to the Muslim consumer. So you want to be careful that the meat is halal. There's, for example, gelatin. You know gelatin? Gelatin is something which makes certain products stay together and soft at the same time. It often is created through pork bones. And many products has it in it. Muslims will not buy it. And if you go online and Google things, there are lists of products Muslims will not buy. Which obviously means you're just losing the market there. Or imagine you would go to a market with many Muslims and you sell something which has something like this in it. They will not buy it, they will actually dislike it. So
originally China right now has targeted, some kind of food, delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the halal label. So this means halal. And by the way, this is also interesting again. If you want to sell, now let's say you're a restaurant and you have halal food, but you don't want to sell to Muslims only. You want to sell to Muslims and non-Muslims. If you write halal like this, you might have a problem, right? You might, I mean, let's say you're not a Muslim. Do you want to go to this restaurant? Maybe not. I don't want to. I want non-meat, right? You might say. But by using this, people might not understand this, right? Non-Muslims might not understand it. So this is actually a middle way. So you're using Arabic language and writing to show to Muslims halal. Because Muslims will see, perfect, it's halal. Non-Muslims, this they understand, but this they might not understand.
We don't understand.
Exactly. So you put this on, you sell chicken, Muslims come to yours, and non-Muslims also come to yours. Because one of the most difficult things is, how do you have the same product sold to Muslims and non-Muslims at the same time? Right? Here, for example, in college, they often have a kind of a halal option. So they sell an option, like if you want, you can have halal chicken. If you don't have to. Right? So
In Chinese, not like that. In Chinese.
really? Okay.
Yeah. We
Okay.
do have specially made for.
How do you say this? How do you say it?
Chengzhen, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What does it mean? Is it just halal?
Chengzhen is like, actually it's the name of the temple. Chengzhen.
A temple?
Yeah.
Muslim temple.
Muslim temple. Chengzhen.
Okay.
Yeah. They do have, for the food.
Yeah.
For them.
You know this one?
And also, I do go to this kind of restaurant.
Yeah. Okay.
In Hong Kong.
In China. Even actually, they have Muslim restaurant do the noodles.
Yeah.
Lamb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lamb.
Okay. And they have this sign like this? Or?
Yes. So I didn't understand. So I read the Chinese. So I think
Also, they have Chinese translation?
yeah, this Chinese there, I know this.
This Chinese?
Because many companies I've seen in Europe, they don't have halal like this. They
Yeah.
only have like this.
Wow.
Because they don't want to show necessarily that they are Muslim or they focus on Muslims. Yeah, so you want to find, and again, if I think about the dates I mentioned, you might find a solution, like an ambiguous solution, which tells Muslims this is okay, but people who are not Muslims, it's fine for them too.
Take a picture. Next time I know what you mean.
I mean, it's really different, right? So there are different versions of this. But yes, please.
I give you a funny picture. What can you say?
So yeah, I see If you like these pictures, yes, an artist called Escher. He has many of this. His name is Escher. He has like 50 of these drawings. This is also from Escher. So he's the artist who drew this. Let's take it. I'll show you later. There are some others. There's, for example, this one with water. And others as well. Escher. If you Google him and make a picture of something, you find a lot. I need to know Chinese. Alright, then the other thing is. It's non-food. Again, there are certain products which might be more or less Islamic. Again, you might want to target it. I mentioned already the app, for example, right? You might want to target, for example, one person said, you can go too far, a Muslim car. And what they designed is, they sold it a bit. They said, well, when you open the door, it speaks, you hear Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, which is from the Quran saying. It's a bit too far. But you can think about what would a modern Muslim want specifically, right? And then design the product accordingly. And the third one is services, which are supposed to be Sharia compliant. I mentioned Sharia before. So many banks want to be Sharia compliant, which means complying with the rules and practices of religion. Right? And like Islamic banks, for example, have a Sharia board, which are 3 scholars who evaluate whether the products in the Islamic bank are all good for them. Right? So, if you think about the different products and so on, again, a way to understand what is out there. Some products are only for Muslims, right? And you might want to sell it like a Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Only Muslims do the pilgrimage. If you want to sell a product like this, well, how you have to design it differently. Some products are mainly for Muslims. Islamic finance, for example. There are also non-Muslims interested in it, but most Muslims are interested in this. Now others, we already talked about halal, target Muslims, but want to be open for others. Right? How do you do this? And that's actually a different way of branding things. Then, some actually, that's also interesting, consumed as an alternative. So for example, you know kosher? You know what kosher is? So Jews eat only kosher food. Okay? So Jews eat kosher food. But Muslims, and it's complicated. So Muslims can eat kosher food. So sometimes Muslims go to the Jewish restaurant and eat kosher food because it's also halal. Yeah. And then there are others where it's, less about religion, it's more about culture. It's, 0% alcohol beer, right? Muslims are allowed to drink beer, they're not allowed to drink alcohol. So the 0% alcohol beer might be a way of selling something to Muslims. And then there are other things, like there's Mecca Cola, for example. Like a company tried to sell Coca-Cola, but differently, they called it Mecca Cola. And Mecca is the place where the pilgrimage is done. So by selling to Muslims, they called it Mecca Cola. And then obviously, so these are very much a language symbolic where religion is less important. These football clubs were bought by Muslims. And another kind of separating different things existing in the market. So you might have water, for example. There's a very special water in Islam called Zam-Zam water. It is a source in Mecca. So you might want to think about selling this. And there are people who are getting the water from there and sell it globally. Food, medicals. So lots of drugs, for example, lots of pharmaceutical drugs have alcohol in them. But a Muslim might not want to take a drug with alcohol. So you might want to create an alternative to a drug with alcohol. Transportation, again, let's say you're a meat company, you produce pork and chicken, and you produce the chicken the halal way, all good. But when you transport them, you put them next to each other. A Muslim would not eat it anymore. So the way you transport the food is also then important. Right? Now we have here, crops, agriculture, again, whether you use alcohol in it or not. Clothing, there might be differences. Like we talked about, like for women, for example, mentioned that already. Cleaners. Some Muslims don't want to have cleaners with alcohol in it, so they want 0 alcohol cleaners. Actually, like teeth washing liquid, it often has alcohol in it. Again, non-alcoholic is something again for the Muslim. Then tourism, you might have spiritual tourism, for example, something big. So you might want to give them a tourism in the countryside near a mosque or something. And then professional services, especially Islamic finance, but other things as well. So this is a huge one. This just gives you opportunities on where you can sell something to the Muslim consumer. Now, what I like to do now is for you, kind of, I now talked a lot, right, about, it's a complex field. I'd like you to think about designing yourself something for the Muslim consumer. And then you tell us a bit what you thought about, and then I can give you feedback and maybe show you where you might think more about what that means. And it's very basic. We use the so-called 4 Ps by McCarthy. Do you know the 4 Ps?
Product, price, and
Yes, and Promotion, yes. So price, place, product, promotion. You might also talk, and if you think about 4 challenges, it's also, so let's write this down. So you said price, and then you can already start thinking about any product you want and how you would sell it to Muslim. You all are the experts, you are businessmen and women who have done something. Think about something you want to sell to the Muslim market, and in like 10 minutes or 5 minutes, present a couple of sentences of what you think about this. And I can also give feedback maybe on what this might mean or not. So you said price, place, product, and promotion. You can also think about 4 challenges. As a challenge for you, which are generally attack. So be attacked by others. Right? If you have a price, there might be danger for you to be attacked by someone else. Then there is by place, accessibility. So access. And again, think about the Muslim and what he or she might do differently. Right? Access then is a challenge, maybe. How do you access the Muslim consumer? Then we have acceptability, so accept. So you now have a product, but how do you make it to be accepted by the Muslim consumer, right? So you create a product, how is it to be accepted? It's a huge challenge because I might not accept you, right, your product. You might create something, but I don't believe you. Why do I believe that this is really halal or compliant? And then the last one, promotion, awareness. So you have this product, it's Muslim, I might just know it, but like, how does the Muslim go about it? So these 4 P's, you might also think about the 4 A's, right? Attack, access, acceptance, and awareness. So on the left-hand side, the 4 P's, then price, place, product, promotion. On the right-hand side, the 4 A's. And think about for the Muslim market then, how can you actually target them? How can you be careful with the price so it might not be someone who's competing with you? How can you create access for the Muslim? To give you one example, and as I said, I'd like you to think about this in a short moment. The prayer room of the mosque, you mentioned in Chinese, the prayer room, right? Yeah. How it's written. Now you might think about your product and say, you know what? If Muslims go to pray, I might use the mosque as a place to sell things. So these are events, for example, I'm consulting with Germany. They went to different mosques and said, can we put in like leaflets here, can we talk to people, and so on. So by knowing that when Muslims go to pray in mosque, you might strategically put your advertisement close to a mosque. Right? Another example. What is the holy day in Christianity? So you Christians, you said, what's the holy day in Christianity? Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what's the holy day? Sunday, right? What do you do on Sunday? Or what Christians often do on Sunday?
Go to church.
Exactly. What day is the same for Muslims? So similar to Sunday is what? Friday, exactly. So Friday lunchtime, that's when Muslims go, especially male Muslims, go to the prayer. So knowing that many male Muslims on Friday at 1 o'clock, around 1 o'clock, go for prayer, if you want to give out leaflets, well, know where the mosques are in your region and give out leaflets at that time, right? And especially after prayer, because before prayer they might be rushing on it. So after prayer you might be, okay, I find out where my 10 mosques are in China, or 50 or 100 mosques, and I distribute leaflets after Friday prayer. So it's very cheap because you find all the Muslims coming together, right? They come to you, effectively, and you can then distribute these. Also, when knowing it's a mosque, you might want to talk to the leaders in the mosque first and say, can I distribute these leaflets? They are halal, and they might want to be, is it really halal? And you might want to invite them, like show them, this is the product, look how I do this, it's all good. And if they say, I like this, you can ask them, can I actually say that you like this, right? Because if the religious leader says this is good, this might be good for you, right? Because the Muslim might be, what do we say, the Muslim might not accept your product, because he or she might be like, I'm not sure whether this is really halal what you're doing. But if the man or woman who leads the mosque says this is good, you might actually get the Muslim feeling, okay, that's fine, the product is good. Right? So you might get acceptance. So by knowing then these kind of smaller things, it helps you to kind of target this Muslim consumer. And obviously, awareness, I mean, this is a place where you find Muslims. Right? And again, what did we say so before we talked about the 5 pillars, right? At the beginning of the class. One pillar was about fasting. Fasting in the month of Ramadan. Again, by knowing this, you can check when will these Muslims eat in the evening and target, again, your distribution accordingly. I mean, let's say you go to a Muslim market and you sell something at lunchtime in Ramadan that no one will buy it, right? I mean, it's a failure right there. They will not buy the product because they're fasting, a lot of them. So this helps them to kind of do promotion and be aware of when they are aware, right? Okay, 5 minutes, what I'd like you to do now is because you're interested obviously in this market, think about a product you would want to sell and design kind of a campaign. Think about price, place, product mode. In any country, say, I want to sell meat to Chinese Muslims. Or I want to sell a swimsuit to Muslims in, I don't know. Think about it maybe as a group, you 3 and you 2. And then tell us how you would go for it and go about it. Okay? 5 minutes, not more. Think about it, and if you have any questions, obviously, you can ask me any questions. But think about it, how would you target a product, choose a country, and think about how you would go targeting this Muslim consumer. Yeah? And 5 minutes, if you have any questions.
Join the girls group. Because they're prettier than you guys are. Muslim market.
Design of jewelry is Arabic people.
Oh, right, okay.
Like
Oh, that's interesting. That's good.
And
What colour gold do you use?
gold color and
Yellow or white?
Yellow, yes.
Yellow.
Yeah. And very colorful and use a lot of pearl. Chinese pearl, and also Chinese pearl is very gorgeous.
Expensive Japanese pearls, aren't they? They make you want
Yeah, use a lot of also use a lot of color stones. And the stones and the pearls are not very expensive, but very designful and very gorgeous. Look very colorful.
Okay. And now, if we want to sell this kind of product, which country do you think it is acceptable?
The new country, how to say that? The newest country? No. It's Muslim country. Dubai.
Dubai, UAE.
Because they are rich. Because
that is because, a lot of luxury hotels and shops and people travel there. So because people travel there and it is a special country for Islam to travel there instead travel to US.
Saudi would be, that's what my case is about, Saudi Arabia is my case.
Yeah.
What product would you think of, Sheena? What would be interesting if you had to sell a product? So if we do maybe jewelry is one, what would you think of? What product would you want?
in the same country,
Or it doesn't matter if you're selling into the Muslim market.
I think it's some kind of like accessories, necklace or bracelet, ring,
to sell the product into Islamic markets, cosmetics, but because it was put on your body, it had to be halal. It had to comply with halal principles. Anything that touches your body, like anything you eat.
Every woman need to cover up.
No. It is a cosmetic. So basically, in kind of Islamic markets, you have them kind of more conservative and the less conservative. So they'll have, some the kind of the whole covering things. I think it's cultural as much as it is religious. I could be wrong, but you find it in the more conservative markets. They tend to cover up more. The less conservative ones they cover less. But don't forget that underneath the hijab and they also wear Western clothing. So what was kind of interesting for us is that we had some Saudi Arabian girls, and when we came, they had when they got into Saudi Arabia, they changed into Western clothing and just covered their heads.
We'll come back together. I think that's very important. So, if you think about the mapping of the Muslim consumer we had before, we talked about mapping the Muslim consumer according to conservative versus liberal. There are different types of Muslim consumers, right? So you want to target, or you want to understand the consumer and maybe target them differently. I mean, you only have 5 minutes, right? I mean, people need much more time to think about this. But let's hear your ideas and thoughts. Maybe you want to start?
Actually, we don't know which is. We start with what? Finally we choose mobile phone.
Okay.
So much products.
Okay.
Which one?
Mobile phone.
Mobile phone.
Yeah, so we target to Muslim customer. We have Canada. The apps. Canada. Also, the fast lane. And also we have the restaurant, Muslim restaurant, okay, we may use the icon, may not be the religious leader, maybe the artist. So we, this is fashion.
Okay. Very good. I mean, so to comment on this, I think you're right. So these are the things these apps, some Muslims might want, right? So you want to be careful, I guess, if you sell, like let's say the phone, with these apps at the same time, you might obviously alienate the non-Muslim market. So one option would be obviously to have this as an option. But when you sell the phone, especially in the Muslim majority markets, you want to advertise the opportunities of the phone, right? So you could create an app campaign, like a campaign for the phone, and show how great apps can be used with this phone. Right? And I can see how like a 30-second advertisement shows how a Muslim uses this new Samsung phone or Apple iPhone, and look at this, I can pray this direction.
You have Qibla.
Exactly. So yes, so I think for advertisement, very powerful to use these apps to sell it to. Also, I mean, some conservative Muslims might be worried about this kind of technology, right? But by actually showing how useful it is for religious practices, this might work. I mean, one argument many kids, for example, have with their parents, they want a phone, right? Daddy, I want a phone, and the parents like, you don't get a phone. But Daddy, I'm always away, and I need to know which way to pray to, right? So these kids might actually use this as well. So I think you can play with these apps for advertising. Yeah, very true.
Can I just say that one of the other things that was quite interesting, and we'll introduce what our group is doing, but one of the issues that we came across in the Japanese market is that the Japanese are going to have the Olympics in 2020. Something like a quarter of the athletes that will be attending that games will be from Muslim markets. And if you look at the Japanese food, I would say about 70% of it, like ramen, either has pork or has pork extract, and that's completely unacceptable for the Muslim market. So you have to think about an alternative for that. And it's kind of interesting because we're working with a company in Malaysia, and they've just secured a deal. So they're a Malaysian company, and they make convenience food, but it's an Islamic company, it's a Muslim company. So it's halal produce, and they have secured a deal with all the hotels that the athletes are staying at. So when the athletes order room service, they know that that room service will be completely halal, because that company is the only one that's able to supply that. So that's quite interesting. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much. Michelle and Sheena had their ideas.
Well, that's very powerful, right? I mean, you see that there's a temporal need for something, and it's a short term. You go in, you sell a specific thing to the hotels, and that's very powerful, right? Lots of money in a short period of time. But if you don't know the Muslim market, you might not meet the Muslim need. You might not have seen and spotted this, right? Okay, Olympic Games. I mean, for example, also if you want to sell sports to Muslims, and in Ramadan, knowing when they eat and when they drink, you might actually change when you want to show, for example, sports, right? So yeah, very, very important.
But it was quite interesting, Ali, as well, because when we were in the restaurant, we were kind of just testing this, and we went along, and because I can speak Japanese a little bit, I said to the guy, you know, it was a beef burger, and I said, you know, but does this have pork in it? He said, yeah, actually, it's mixed.
Yeah.
So even if you think you're eating beef, you know, it's not actually had pork in it, so you have to be very careful. Anyway, Michelle, go ahead.
Okay. I'm thinking that to sell my jewelry in Dubai a long time ago, that is because I think first because Dubai is the country that instead to Islam people to go to US because after the terrorist affair, that after that year US treat the Muslim people all as criminal. So many of them come to Dubai to spend their holiday time. So children and wives, it's a family come there, and I think rich people come there, and I think I can use that time to make my colorful design to attack the woman, and my jewelry is not like the traditional jewelries can make by hand, so that I can attack them first by design, and then I can tell the woman that I can teach them to make the jewelry by their own hand at home, and I can watch who will really interested about it, and through them I can have somebody to increase my market at other countries, because everybody come from their own country and can bring my design and my idea come to their own country, and the woman can use their own woman communications to do their business with me.
You touched on many things very important, but I think that's a beautiful idea. The first one you mentioned, which I think is powerful, is when you mentioned Americans, right? I think actually the Chinese have a huge opportunity there. Because yes, there is some kind of, tension between the West and Islam, right? You're from China. Well, you can actually use that, right, to your advantage. You go there, you're not this evil, I'm not saying they are, right? But if some Muslims say Americans are evil, well, you're not Americans, right? You can sell this, and you'll be this other side of selling a nice product. Why not use this and go into the market?
Yeah.
We talked about this before. Obviously important in your advertising campaign, not men wear gold, right? So you want to be careful there. Jewelry for women is perfect. You might want to think about, for example, end of Ramadan, when there's a huge celebration, to kind of introduce it then and say, you know what, that's a good time to sell the jewelry. You want to be careful about how you want to show the woman. Because one difficulty is obviously, if you show jewelry around the neck, how much skin do you show in these countries, right? That's an important question. How much would you show? And you might find a solution. And obviously women at home, they wear the same things that say Western women wear outside, right? They want to they want to wear these things, and the question is how do you show it to them? You
Yeah.
might find places where only
yeah.
women go, for example, and you
Oh.
could show more skin there, for example.
Mm.
There are certain places and so on. So you might want to think about how can I target it to women? How can I make it how it looks like show without maybe showing skin or, I mean, it depends really on which market you target.
Yeah, we can have the Chinese style dress. That's its cover from neck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Ali means is in terms of the jewellery.
Yeah.
So if it was here, it would be too low. But if the jewellery was here, maybe here, it's showing less skin.
Yeah.
So it's better, really.
Yeah. On the other hand, obviously, at home, I mean, these Muslim women also wear less clothes, right? And they want to look good for their husbands.
Yeah.
So again, there they might want to have something where they show more. But the question is, how do you show to them without showing them publicly? Right? And that's a huge question you need to answer for yourself. And there might be places where only women shop, and you might want to show there. There might also be ways of how to appeal to men to buy this for women. And again, I think it's important to understand these nuances. Again, as we said before, in different countries and different levels of religiosity, there are different views to it. So let's say Dubai might be very open. If you go to Abu Dhabi, it's a bit trickier there. And so you go, I mean, not across the road, but a bit further, you might actually have a different marketing campaign in Abu Dhabi than Dubai. So these nuances are very important. But I think, there's a huge market. What you also mentioned, which is important, we talked about the Muslim consumer is finishing it on wealth. There are lots of super rich Muslims, also very, very poor. So you target rich Muslims, right? I think that's a powerful market, which is growing strongly. Okay, all right. Do you have any questions for each other? Or do you have any questions to her?
Very good example,
Yeah.
So you need to do a lot of research for
Market research.
Middle East female. What maybe kind of what kind of design, what kind of pattern they traditionally would be.
But it's an interesting point also that Ali made, from the perspective of the Chinese business person, because in Malaysia you have an organization called HDC, it's the Halal Development Corp, and they advise non-Muslims on, particularly on food-related products. And they said, I was talking to a guy that worked from them, and he said now they're getting delegations from China coming in every week. So, in terms of our certification, what do we need to do? How do we want to sell, into the Muslim market? Food products in particular, what do we need to do? How can we be compliant, etc., etc. So I think the Chinese business people are aware of this market already. So.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes left. Let me actually, so if you want to, I've written on the Muslim producer, but I won't talk about this. I actually like to show you just a case example from the Islamic Bank in Germany. So I think that's very interesting how they did it. So you mentioned before there are minority and majority Muslim markets, right? And with the minority Muslim market, as we said before, you want to target the Muslim consumer, but you also want to target the other consumer, right? So you don't want to alienate the other consumer. And this is the campaign they did. It's in German, so it says, now there's a bank which is the first, which is also Islam compliant in Germany. Right? So that's Islam compliant. If you look at this picture, yes, there's a Muslim woman with a headscarf, so religious, but the landscape looks actually quite German. So if you're from Germany, it looks quite German. But there's a date tree. And I mentioned before to you, this date tree has a very religious connotation for Muslim. And non-Muslim might just be like, it's a date tree, right? Quite nice. So it's a very subtle way of putting this in, right? And this date tree is also the symbol. So this is the bank, it's called KT Bank. They have this symbol, which Muslims understand. So if you don't want to go to the Dubai market, but you want to go to the Muslims in China, 20, 30 million of them, but you want to sell to Muslims and non-Muslims, you might find like a subtle strategy entering that market, right? Here's another example. Again, you see the date tree, and this is the Hamburg, this is Frankfurt City, so the financial center. Obviously, we are a bank, right? Financial center showing you this. And it says, now there's a bank which doesn't speculate, but invests meaningfully. This sentence, for example, invest meaningfully, again, applies to everyone, right? I want to invest meaningfully, kind of, right? But I'm Muslim or not. So again, they use this, but Muslims understand this means there's no speculation, which is forbidden in Islam. So speculation is forbidden. That word for Muslim singles, that's good. For non-Muslim singles, oh, this is a good, interesting bank, right? Third one, this is a Hamburg Harbor. There's now a bank which does do trade, but not with everything. Which doesn't trade with everything. It always trades with responsibility. Again, this word handel, meaning trading, is again something in Islam. The bank is not supposed to do investment, it's not supposed to do interest and so on, it's supposed to be trading. Right? So again, that word signals trading, Islamic. But the interesting thing is, this Islamic component, only Muslims see this. Whereas others might be like, yeah, oh, it's good to have trading, right? It's good to have this alternative ethical bank. So I think if you target a minority Muslim market, the strategy is very, very different from a majority Muslim market where you only cover the Muslim consumer. I think this is a very interesting case how they actually did this in this campaign, right? With that last minute, I just want to say, what you do with this, I mean, this is, you know this cat by any chance?
Alice in Wonderland?
Exactly, it's the cat Alice meets in Alice in Wonderland. And Alice meets this cat, by the way, Alice,
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis was a professor at Christchurch. If you haven't seen Christchurch, you should check it out. It's a college in Oxford. And C.S. Lewis was a professor, and actually the daughter of the dean, so the dean is the professor, the head, the president of Christchurch. Alice in Wonderland was actually based on the daughter of the dean of Christchurch. And if you go behind Christchurch, you see the door Alice went through when she went to Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, Alice meets this cat and says, which way ought I go from here? What way do I have to go? And you might ask yourself too, like, what do I do now, like, from now on with this knowledge about the Islamic consumer? And the cat answers, and it's very, very powerful. It depends a good deal on where you want to get to. So it depends on you. I mean, what you want to do? You want to go to Dubai. You want to go to the minority Muslim market with a Chinese restaurant. I think these tools, I mean, the knowledge about the Muslim consumer helps you then to pursue your path as entrepreneurs better. And either pursue this or that. And I hope I've given you in the last 90 minutes like a toolkit to better understand the Muslim consumer, who's obviously very, very complex, but something I think if you target might be very, very beneficial to you. So with that, we've covered that. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, I think that's really a really important market, and what's kind of important about it is sometimes I find that, and I'm not being, hopefully not being unfair, but sometimes the American business people don't take the market seriously enough. Sometimes. But I think, you know, this is a really important market. It's a big market. And if you, as Ali says, if you have the right tools to understand how the psychology of the Muslim consumer, then you can be successful in that market. Good, excellent, fascinating. Thank you, Ali. Very enjoyable. All right, guys, it's lunchtime.